Stories are everywhere. They're a key part of what it is to be human. All the way back from when we were still in the caves, sitting around campfires and watching the beautiful paintings on the walls, to the current immersive worlds of cinema, storytelling has been a tool for humanity to understand the world around us, but also to understand each other and to connect with each other. But I'm not here to talk about that today. I would like to shed light on the darker side of storytelling, the one that can be used to mislead and to misinform, which is also something that I believe is becoming the norm slowly, rather than the exception, especially so in marketing. Now, the first example I would like to give is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and the company Theranos. Holmes' team really managed to weave a very captivating narrative about this genius Stanford dropout who had entrepreneurial spirit, wanted to save the world, wanted to make an impact by revolutionizing blood testing, changing it from this cumbersome, expensive procedure to just a simple prick at the finger. Now, Theranos and Elizabeth's story resonated well, not just with the simple Joe and with the masses, with people like you and me, but also with investors. Theranos attracted billions of dollars in funding, and what is interesting is that actually Holmes ended up becoming the world's richest self-made female billionaire with a net worth of 4.5 billion. So that's what good storytelling brought her to. The problem? Well, it was mostly or almost entirely a complete fabrication. A nice sounding story with just a little truth behind the facade. Theranos technology didn't actually work how it was promised to. The company was really just built on a foundation of empty promises and, quite frankly, lies. And of course, when this was found out, it all went crashing down around them. What's another striking example of using storytelling for manipulation is the famous, or should I say, infamous FYRE festival that happened not too long ago. Now this event was marketed as this amazing one-of-a-kind experience on this private island. It was advertised with supermodels, with influencers, and promised an unforgettable experience. Basically, it was supposed to be paradise on earth for its visitors. But then the reality was quite far from that, to be honest. The people who went there were met with chaos. They were met with tents instead of luxury accommodations, with prepackaged sandwiches instead of gourmet meals, and an overall complete lack of organization, of amenities, and of entertainment. The festival's organizer, Billy McFarland, had created this narrative which was so believable and so compelling that indeed it made a lot of people pay thousands of dollars to go to this supposed paradise on earth, only to receive pretty much nothing but disappointment in return. Thankfully, Billy was later convicted of fraud, as he should have been, but this still leaves quite a mark and a lasting impression, and it shows just how powerful a well-crafted story and a relatively trusted storyteller can be in deceiving people. Now, not every dark use of storytelling is a blatant scam like the ones I just mentioned. Sometimes we just get caught up in a good story, and that also counts for the storytellers, not just for the people on the other end. No one is immune to this. We all get tangled in narratives that aren't quite real because of our pattern-seeking brains, which are literally wired to do this. They are wired to find meanings in stories, even if those meanings just aren't quite there. And we also tend to trust information that is presented as a nice story. We get emotionally involved in it and we remember the information better. It can of course be a problem when we try to tackle a lot of data through these stories, as the focus on trying to tell a compelling and well-rounded story can often consciously or unconsciously outweigh the focus on telling the facts as they are. Now, another critical factor is the trust we put in the source of the story. So when it comes from a source that we've come to trust over the years, so whether it be brands, whether it be media outlets, whether it be influencers even that we find trustworthy, we kind of tend to take in what they tell us, take in the stories that they tell us, without further scrutiny. Now, this trust can of course be exploited to sell a narrative that may not quite hold up under closer examination. So, how can we kind of try to avoid this? Well, the next time you encounter a story, just whether it be in marketing, in the news, or from your favorite YouTuber, or even from a friend, consider the following few questions. What story am I telling myself about the situation? Have I ignored any evidence that contradicts this story that I've come to like? What happens if I turn this story or the narrative in this story on its head and look at it that way? By being critical of the stories we encounter in our daily lives and asking ourselves questions such as these, we can become at least less susceptible to manipulation and still enjoy the beauty of storytelling without falling into the traps that our own mind sets up for us. Now, to get a more qualified opinion on this topic, I decided to interview a professional in the media industry. So without further ado, please enjoy this interview with Mirjam Lawrence. Okay, so Mirjam, hi and welcome to Burui. I'm very glad to have you here on the channel. It's a pleasure, it's an honor. We've never had such guests before. How are you doing today?
Good, slightly stressed, but good in general.
I hope I don't stress you out with any of my questions. Okay, to start off, I would like to ask you something kind of easier to ease into the interview. Do you believe that nowadays, okay, maybe it's not that, it's maybe a light. Do you believe that nowadays storytelling is a power for good, or has it gone more to the dark side, so to say?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because storytelling is a very powerful tool, and you could argue that it may be in the wrong hands at the moment. So many brands use storytelling techniques to bring across their corporate story, which can be confused quite easily with being good, because you're talking about universal human values. So for an audience, it's maybe sometimes harder to distinguish if the brand is actually good or if they're just telling a very good story. So I wouldn't say it's how did you just call it? I wouldn't say it's a bad.
The dark side.
It's gone to the dark side necessarily, but it's a powerful tool for anyone who masters it. So it depends on the goal you have in mind as a creator. Yeah.
And do you believe that now in the digital age, this has kind of got a bigger problem with using stories maybe to misinform, or at least to tell a story first without paying that much attention to the details and the actual information? Or do you think it has always kind of been there?
Well, there's many more channels now, of course, to tell the stories. Back in the days, it would just be your grandfather telling you a story by the fire, and it then moved to a news channel on the radio and then the television, but it was much more organized, right? What we could hear and what was told to us. But I mean, was it War of the Worlds was it the late 30s?
Yeah.
The radio story that had such a huge impact on the listeners, and they actually thought that it was happening for real. They were actually moving out of their homes because they just tuned in and missed the message that it was a play. So then you had basically a whole society on its feet, but now it's much more fragmented. So it's I think we're dealing with a very different world. In terms of misinformation, I don't know if storytelling is necessarily a tool that helps that movement. I think storytelling is much more powerful in telling a brand story, or for the bad and the good, or in general just entertainment and bringing people together. And in terms of misinformation, that doesn't need storytelling to grow.
How important do you find including diverse perspectives when telling stories, whether it be for marketing, for media purposes, anything? And do you think that also helps with making the storytelling more objective?
That's a really tough question, because I think the more choices you make, the more specific you make a story, the stronger it becomes almost. So I've made a lot of stories or films for corporates where they had some sort of diversity and inclusion policy. So we had to actually include many different perspectives, or we had to include many different messages, like brand messages or corporate messages. And that only kind of dilutes the story. So I do think, though, that doing research amongst a diverse group of stories or a diverse group of people, and then coming up with a good script or story, if it's fiction anyway, that definitely helps to improve the story. But to then also show all those different voices and different stories within that story, that's harder, because then you kind of, you lack all specificity, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Can you actually, you mentioned something that I was also about to ask. Can you elaborate more about how do you exactly approach more sensitive topics in that sense? What do you do to remain respectful and balanced, but still tell the story and say what the brand or what you said?
So that's also a fine line. So I made a film for a funeral corporation once, and that was about a lady who actually used their services, and what they wanted was to zoom in on her grief and also how this funeral service actually helped her in getting everything done. And there, during the interview and the pre-interview and everything, she cried and she was really sad, and she was talking about losing her son. So you can imagine that is a very rough patch for this woman, a big pain. But we chose not to leave the tears in the film, because we thought the essence was much better kept by the words that she used, and the pain was already inevitable. We knew that she was in a lot of pain. We didn't need the tears, and that's kind of the sensationalism that we chose not to use, because we felt that it would be disrespectful to her, and at the same time not tell the story that much better, nor sell. Another time when I did choose to use tears was when we were traveling around the world together with an influencer. This was in 2015, when influencers were just kind of becoming big, and we had the idea to travel around the world with her to show European initiatives. So the European Committee wanted to make work that they do around the world more interesting for the younger generation. So what we did was we toured around with her so she could actually tell her following, but also us as documenters, the filmmakers, what she experienced in every place. But her level of excitement and her just general tone of voice was just so extremely positive and energetic, but we needed to get that story arc. We needed to get her into some sort of conflict. So after we were in a refugee camp in Lebanon, actually, with Syrian refugees lived there, and she went back in the car and I was sitting next to her, and I saw that she was so moved by everything, and I just kept rolling and I asked her some questions, and there she cried. But that was the only moment that we actually saw the real her. So we did choose to leave it in, and she was happy with it, actually. She was fine with it. So I did check it with her then again. And there the tears were kind of needed to also show what it did with her. We needed to show her transformation and what she learned from seeing what was done in these projects. So it had a function there. Yeah. And I think always being what I would say is to always stay in close contact with your protagonist. So even take them along the story. If it's a non-fiction story, then take them along through the beats of your story. Basically say like, okay, today we're looking for this, or We are looking for you can be vulnerable, because this is what we're after, you know, and that shows them the boundaries a little bit within which they can operate, and what we're looking for, you know, but they know that there's not a hidden agenda.
So you kind of also reveal a more authentic part of them that maybe they don't.
Yeah, I think it's more of a co-creation.
Yeah.
Because who are we fooling? I mean, the camera is there. They know that the camera is there, right? And also the audience knows that the camera is there more and more. When I first started, it was less so, because then we were not filming ourselves yet. We didn't have our cameras yet, and it wasn't as integrated in everything. But now that fourth wall is kind of gone, right? We know what it's like to make a video, and we're not fooled anymore. It's not anymore so it's so abstract. It's very super tangible, because we know how to do it. And I think if you involve your protagonist and almost your audience into this story and create it together, then that creates even more authenticity.
And one of the last couple of questions for the people kind of on the other side of the screen, who are the viewers, who are actively engaged in producing content, what tips would you give these people to kind of be more critical?
Yeah, I saw that question, and that's tough, because for me, because I've been doing it for so long, I think I'm pretty critical, but it's difficult to pinpoint what you're critical about. Well, I guess you could ask yourself the question. You can ask yourself the question: Is it the story that I'm moved by and the protagonist, or is it the brand itself? And I guess it does mean that you will have to do another step in your research, because stories make a lot of things look very nice. Yeah.
So maybe kind of you need to take a step back, but also a step sideways and look elsewhere also.
Yeah, and it's also a bit blurred anyway, because if a company manages to make such a good story, then it also demonstrates their kind of creative choices, or their daringness to make something like that, or maybe even shows that they like to see the human nature, or so they have all these. You perceive a brand differently than to what they actually do, right? Their performance. So yeah, you do, in order to be, I think it's hard for the audience though now to make that distinction and to be more critical. It's not an easy task.
Yeah.
Because I'm also just like, a good campaign can really change my brand perception. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And it's even harder if it's coming from a brand or a person that you already kind of trust to be more critical, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The last question I have is, you already mentioned something about how we're kind of moving into a time where content marketing is more of a thing. It's less about pushing content, more about pull marketing. And you also mentioned AI. Do you see any other trends emerging now, or do you foresee maybe any in the near future that could be groundbreaking in media and marketing?
Groundbreakingness, I'm not sure about, but what I notice is that film, well, it's changing and inevitably. I mean, AI is going to affect it a lot creatively. But we are still very much needed, because the creativity starts somewhere, and I think that filmmakers may have to reinvent themselves slightly, but be open to these changes. And I hope that filmmakers will work on these skills, basically these soft skills that sets them apart from the technology. So that they can actually still tell the real human stories. What I also see, and what I love to see, is how creative people actually are. If you look on your timeline on Instagram, and you can just get into this rabbit hole of just pure laughter and fun, and what people make up, and little videos, and there's so much creativity. So here as well, like this, there's like all these young people, but everyone really, like just making stuff and having fun and doing challenges and sharing stuff, and it's just really nice actually. So the phone is not only that damn phone, it at the same time it's an inspiration and it's fun and it connects people too. So we need to just find a balance, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good line to end the interview on.
Good.
Find the balance.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for all of the wonderful answers.
Thank you.